Hey everybody, I'm back. There's something to be said for doing things right the first time. I'm not going to try and say perfectionism. I'm not a perfectionist. I screw things up. Everybody screws things up. We all do it. You know, you mismeasure a board, you cut it too short, you screw up an angle, something like that. You can go back and redo that. You can fix, you can recover. You can do that in a lot of cases. Piece of pipe, you screw it up, you can recover that, right? But there's some things that they need to work the first time, every time, and they need to be right. So it pays to know what you're doing and to be able to do it right. And I'm not going to say don't do it yourself. I'm a big DIY guy. What I'm saying is learn the right way to do things and don't screw them up. So, three things are off the top of my head. If you're doing jarring and canning and you don't do it right, you can make yourself really sick or maybe kill yourself. Botulism, right? You need to do it and do it right. You need to be correct. You can't just decide, well, you know, it's supposed to cook for 90 minutes, but I think 75 is good enough, you know. Nope. Do it right. Another thing, if you've been following me, dealing with radio equipment, if it's critical use radio equipment such as public safety, it needs to be done right the first time. Not like some radio shops have done and have actually told me in person, well, if it doesn't work, just bring it back. No, that is unacceptable, because if a programmer or a shop puts a radio out to somebody, police, fire, EMS, or whatever, and they are depending on that radio, their life depends on that radio, and it doesn't work, they might not be alive to bring it back to get it fixed because somebody fat fingered it, screwed it up, or whatever. It needs to be right the first time. Here's another thing that always needs to be right. Firearms, right? If something's not right, it ain't gonna work right. You might not be alive because of a malfunction to fix it later. So you need to learn what you're doing. Experts were not born. Nobody hatched from their mama being an expert in anything or knowing anything, right? We all started basically empty plate. We had to learn everything we know regardless of whatever that is we know, right? So there's nothing wrong with doing your own work. As I said, I'm a big DIY guy, do it yourself, but there's some things you need to be 100% on. Guns is one of them. If you're going to depend on them to save your life or your family, loved ones, whatever, you need to make sure they're right. So don't screw them up. Learn the right way. And if you're using a hammer on a Glock, for example, because somebody on YouTube or whatever said, oh, you drive this pin out with a hammer, discount that person. They have no idea what they're talking about. Do not take their advice. You do not use hammers on Glocks, period. End of story. If you do, you're doing something wrong and you're going to start breaking things. So today I'm working on putting ambidextrous safety selectors into some ARs. So I've already taken the pistol grip off, and I got to strip out the lower receiver in order to remove the old safety selector. Okay, seems pretty simple and straightforward. All right, well, if it's not done right, you can screw things up. I have actually found hammer springs installed backwards. When I get this out, I'll show you what I mean. And people have done it. So if you don't know what you're doing, you put the hammer spring in backwards, what's to say that that firearm is going to function when you need it and function properly? Because somebody didn't know what they were doing and did it incorrectly. And I'm going to run you through another scenario with the buffer on this also, about somebody not knowing what they were doing and they damaged some of their parts and had to go get new parts. So here's the hammer out of the lower, okay? And you can see this is a spring. That is a one-way fit. It goes no other way, all right? So what I just mentioned was somebody had it on there backwards. So I'm going to hold the hammer. basically this spring was 180 degrees, and then they put it on there. So when this comes down in your receiver, it is supposed to bend that way, right? That's what it looks like, okay? Well, the way they had it rigged up was when the hammer came back, it was bending the spring this way, opening the coils. Notice how the spring is wound, right? This way, on your side, this way, that coil is opening. This way, you're putting tension against the coil the way it's supposed to be. Whoever put it in there didn't know what they were doing. Why do I think I know what I'm doing? I didn't learn doing this on screw tube or anything like that. I actually was a certified armorer for M16s and AR-15s. And I went to a manufacturer, 2-day class, to get that certificate. All right, I got my trigger out now. And there's little tricks to ARs, little itty bits and tricks and pieces and all that. See that little spring sticking up? There's a way to tell if that's bad. If you don't know that, you could have a bad spring in there, look at it, not have a clue, and think it's good to go. That's where people like me come into play. All right. Now I got my safety selector out. While I have this thing stripped out, we're going to talk about the buffer real quick. That's right here. Okay, thunk, thunk, thunk. There's a tube. Inside the tube is a big freaking spring with a buffer. And I'm going to pull it out and show you. Now, these two guys that screwed up a rifle, not knowing what they were doing, called me up and said, here's what's going on. I said, all right, walk me through it. They walked me through it, sent me a couple videos. I said, well, here's your problem. It's very simple. But for somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, they couldn't figure it out. So what was happening was they put their gun together, they screwed their stock in. This, as you can see, has threads and it screws into the lower receiver. They put their buffer spring in, they put their buffer in, okay. Right here, you have a little button. That's a buffer detent. Below that is a spring. Spring holds it up. That is what holds that in there, okay? So when you cycle your bolt carrier group, fire it, whatever, when that comes to the rear, this is coming backwards. Notice that stays there. That doesn't move. And that's supposed to stop, right? All right, so if you know about ARs, you probably know where I'm going with this. So what was happening? They assembled everything. They put the upper on, had it good to go. Cycled the weapon, and it was jamming up. That detent was coming up, the buffer was coming out. So the spring was also coming out, the detent spring was coming out, everything was jamming up and they couldn't figure out why. I said, well, your problem is your stock ain't screwed in far enough. With the buffer spring and buffer removed, we can now look in there, all right? So the only thing that captures that detent and keeps that from popping out is right there on the edge of the stock. It overlays it, just a whisker, all right? So what they did was they just didn't have it screwed in far enough to overlay it and capture the thing. So it was popping up, popping up, popping up. And every time they'd cycle it, everything was going forward and jamming up. I said, well, first of all, you've destroyed that spring. You need to go get a new spring, because it was absolutely destroyed. And I said, so when you put the new spring in, put your detent back in, hold it down in there, take your stock one more turn, until it comes in enough to capture and hold that down in there. And then like this, you can see me moving it. I'm pushing it down. It should stay there on its own. If it doesn't, there's something wrong. So they did that. That fixed the problem. But because they didn't know what they were doing, they were screwing up a spring. They screwed up a part. Well, what if you can't get another part? Or what if you put that firearm together, cycled it, thought, yep, it's good, and then you go to use it, especially for critical use, we'll say, and it don't work because of something that petty. Something that small, something that petty can absolutely ruin your day. All right, so, maybe it doesn't seem like much, but knowing what you're doing and doing it the correct way can save you a lot of aggravation and maybe save you. All right, let's talk about the buffer and the buffer spring real quick. If somebody doesn't know, they're going to think an AR-15 is a rifle, right? So they're building it themselves. I'm building an AR rifle, and they go and they get a 16-inch barrel, they get an upper, they get a lower, they get all their parts and pieces, and they start doing a DIY build. Well, because they think they're building a rifle, they get a rifle buffer and a rifle spring for a 16-inch barrel. Doesn't compute, doesn't work that way. The 16-inch is known as a carbine, okay? So I'm going to show you. Here is the spring and the buffer out of the carbine. Here is a spring for a rifle. I'm going to hold them end for end. There you go. What do we got? You got like a 2-inch length difference there, right? Mm-hmm. You sure do. And I don't happen to have one, but a rifle buffer, that piece right there, is heavier. So, what happens if you jam that longer spring and a heavier buffer into your carbine rifle? You're going to have problems. New safety selector is in. I still have to put this side on. Function checks out. It's working. All that together. Let's function check it, see if it works. Yep, that's exactly what should happen because hammer position is forward. So, let's cock it. All right, that's working. Now we should be able to go to safe. Yep. Now when we squeeze the trigger, nothing should happen. Good. Go to fire. Hammer should drop. Hammer drops. I'm going to hold the trigger back, okay? Now when I pull the hammer back down, it should click and lock. All right, there we go. Now when I release the trigger, it's going to bounce up just a little bit. It should not fall forward. There you go. Safety should come on now. Function checks, good to go. This is the bolt. All right. No, you don't put a wrench on it. But right there, you get 3 silver rings. Those are the gas rings. Okay. If those fail, those get bad, you're going to have malfunctions because the gas, after you fire, needs to get in behind those, and that's what pulls everything to the rear. Now, another thing that can cause you problems, here we go. Notice right there we've got some gaps in them. All right? Those gaps need to be offset. They say about 120, so 1, 2, 3 per ring. So this one, this one, this one going around. If those gaps get lined up, what do you got? You've got a little air channel that gas can escape through, right? Yep. So you will be losing gas where you don't want gas to go. And you're not going to get the pressure behind the bolt to pull your whole bolt carrier group to the rear. Seems pretty stupid and simple, right? But it can cause you problems. Are you going to get perfect 120? No, you're not. And as this thing moves around in there, it's going to move the rings. You can't help that. So basically the big thing is just try and stagger them, offset them as best as you can. So for my demo, I had a couple of them lined up. Now you can see the rear one's over here, middle one is right there, and then the front one is right there. I know it's hard to see it, but they're all offset so that the gas will stay where the gas needs to be. All right, there's also a way to check those to see if they're good. They're a ring, and they snap on around there. Over time, especially if you fire a lot, they're going to wear out. So how do you check them? How do you know if they're still good or not? Doing your own build and you really don't know what you're doing, okay? So let's say you put your bolt carrier group together and you put your firing pin in. It looks like a nail, okay? Here's your firing pin. So let's say you install it. Okay, firing pin is in. You're good to go, right? No, you're not. Because what can happen? It can fall back out. Well, if you missed something, you're going to get that problem. So, let me get it back down in his home, get in the hole. There we go. Drop it in there, make sure it's seated all the way. And if you don't install it correctly, you're going to have problems too. So we have a little retaining pin. We do not use cotter keys, okay? That retaining pin needs to go in that hole. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a bugger. You might have to wiggle and jiggle it just a little. Eventually, it's going to drop in there. Like that. It's in. Okay? If you don't know what you're doing at this point, you think, I'm good to go. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. So let's say you put all this together and you fire that weapon. It goes bang and then something bad happens. Well, maybe you just lost your firing pin. Because even though you've got that little retaining pin in there, what if you didn't have that firing pin in far enough to capture it? So you want to make sure she's in there. All right? Because if it falls back out with that pin in, you did not get that in far enough. You notice it looks like a nail with two heads on it, right? That pin, capture pin there, goes between those two heads. So if it's forward of that lower head, you're not going to capture it. Okay, I said, how do you check gas rings? How do we know that when the gas comes in this gas key here and goes down through here, it's going to stay in there and move all this to the rear like it's supposed to do? Well, it's very, very simple. And again, if you don't know, you don't know. Go like this. Pull it out, whatever. Your bolt goes out and in. Okay? So make sure it is out, forward. Take your carrier group, stand it up, just like that. If it holds its own weight, you're good to go. If you stand that up and it starts sinking down, you have bad gas rings. I'm not trying to sound like a know-it-all here. I'm just trying to point out there's a lot of these little things that if you're not aware of them, you can be setting yourself up unknowingly for failure, and you think you're doing it right when you're actually not. So you need to learn, and you need to learn correctly. The bolt, you can take it apart further than that. Replacing gas rings is a piece of cake, honestly. You just got to be careful doing it. You don't damage them putting them on. The bolt, you can pull your extractor off. You got a little top hat there. There's little itty bitty things inside of that bolt. And if you don't know what you're doing and try and put it together and you do it wrong, you're going to be setting yourself up for problems. I can take the ejector out of the bolt. I have the special bolt vise to do that. And if you don't know how to do that and you don't have the special tool to do that, don't try to do that, because you're going to screw things up. So there's just, the AR is not a very simple gun. It's not like a Glock where you basically got, half a dozen parts or something, and That's all it is, and a couple springs. There's a lot of little intricate parts inside of an AR. And if they're not right, they're not going to work right. Or they might work right for a little while and then they're going to fail. So they need to be right. All back in one piece now, as you can see. And we're going to call it good, right? No, we're not. Now that we're all assembled, we're going to function check everything in its entirety. We already function checked the lower. We're going to function check that again in conjunction with the upper. Make sure everything is doing what it's supposed to do. So, safety. Yep, it works. Well, where should our hammer be right now? Let's find out, right? What's going on? Okay, we're ready to rock and roll. So we turn the fun switch on. Hammer is going to drop. Okay, that's what it's supposed to do. Safety will no longer engage because, as I showed you before, hammer has dropped. So with the trigger to the rear, okay, because this is semi-automatic, trigger to the rear, we're going to recharge this, holding the trigger to the rear. And we're going to just let go of the charging handle. All right. Now, what should happen? What happened when we had the upper off and you could see it? When I release the trigger, the hammer is going to go up just a little and you're going to hear a thunk. Trigger reset right there. Safety should now work. You're ready to fire. She function checks out. This gun is good to go. I'm all for you DIYing it. I'm all for you learning these things. I really am. Because I think one of the dumbest things is having a piece of equipment and not knowing how it works. So there's people out there that go and buy guns and they can put holes in paper, but they really have no idea how the thing works other than you load it up and you squeeze the trigger and it goes bang. If something breaks, they have no knowledge behind that on how to repair it, how to fix it. It's called, oh, well, you know, I take it to a gunsmith. If they can't fix it, then it has to go back to the manufacturer. And it could be something very simple and stupid. All right? And when I get into something like Beretta H&K, I don't run none of that stuff. And that's why. They're just too much of an ass pain. I like the ARs. I got a good grasp on the ARs, obviously. Same thing with Glock. Glock, I mean, it doesn't get no more simpler than a Glock. It's easy to diagnose problems. It is easy to fix. So why do you want to have a gun that has so many extra moving parts just because it looks cool, right? And I'm not going to trash on AKs, SKs, I mean, whatever you got. If you want to learn how to properly run an AK, work on an AK, build an AK, SK, whatever you want, all the more power to you. H&K, Springfields, you name it. But the point is, learn your platform, learn it correctly so you know it inside and out. So if something goes wrong, you have an idea on how to repair it and not, well, you know, I got to send it away for 2 months and now I don't have it. Catch you later.